And I will ask you to.
Hey, Garrett, can you hear us again?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, anyone that wants to speak tonight, make sure that you have signed up on the list out in the lobby.
Okay, we got another minute, but before we got, we are in,
We are live.
we are live. Awesome. Oh, there's Tom. Oh, that's one.
Yeah, I missed it, but just, but didn't have to keep.
I know. He cracked up on it.
Is he checking in on me?
He doesn't trust me like, what am I going to play? He wants to make sure. That's being recorded. You don't need to put that in this.
Okay. 6 o'clock, I call to order the meeting of the Fairport Planning Commission on Thursday, February 8th at 6 p.m. Before we get started, we have a new member tonight, Eric. And Eric, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Eric Halpern, and I've lived in Earhart full-time since 2017. I am a retired optometrist. I spent 30 years in practice in Tillamook, and we moved up here. I've been a member of the Budget Committee for since 2021 or 2022. And this is my first meeting on the Planning Commission. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, so all members are here of the commission and John is joining us remotely. Good evening, John. So the first thing we have on the agenda, election of officers. We do this once a year. Yep, we do it once a year. We have to have a president and a vice president. So I hear any nominations from the floor.
I nominate Jenny Didium to be president.
I second. Okay, any other nominations? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. I abstain because I'm prejudiced. No. We need a vice president.
Who's second?
Oh,
I second.
I'm sorry. There were 2 seconds. I usually state who made the motion and who seconds. I apologize for that. We need a vice president.
I nominate Russ.
Okay, Dawn has nominated Russ. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Judy seconds. Any other nominations? All right, hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Russ, congratulations.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I'm gone, one, I think. All right, so we moved on to election of officers. We have the consent agenda in front of us. It's been a while since we met, the last time being in November, so. The minutes are there, the financial report, there is no correspondence. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda as submitted? All right, Russ has moved, do I have a second? Second. Paulina has seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, moving on from there, we have reports. First. Oh, I'm sorry, John, did you vote?
I voted aye.
Okay, I'm so sorry, I forget. Reports, staff. Chad, do you have anything for us today?
I'll keep it short. Today, we do have a town hall coming up on the 26th of this month. So city council is really working hard. We're starting over on the public safety building discussion. Fire station, police station, potential. And so we're gonna start talking about that again. We have been a little bit. We've had one town hall already. The mayor has really been working hard to try to have as many town halls as possible to have open discussions about what the thought processes are, how we got to where we are, looking at the needs assessments, looking at, locations. There's nothing set in stone. I just want to, there's nothing set in stone. We're starting anew, and it'll be a really robust public process this time. So first opportunity, or another opportunity is the 26th
Chad, the time is that?
at
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Okay.
Thank you. And so,
Fire station.
what was that? It's gonna be at the fire station again, yeah. And we're also gonna have a work session on the 12th, so next Monday, to discuss that town hall with city council, so. Just want to update you on that. Other than that, I don't have anything at the moment.
Okay, excellent. Angelina, do you have anything? No. Jelena has nothing? What? I'm getting there. We have not seen our land use attorney for a long time. Would our land use attorney, Mr. Walton, do you have anything to report to us today?
Yeah, I hope I'm not stepping into Garrett's shoes, but the city council is going to have you guys take another look at the tree ordinance. And I didn't get a great feeling of where all of them are on it. I think that they're kind of interested in seeing what other cities are doing around trees. There was kind of a general acknowledgement that trees were good, that people like trees. A couple of them seemed like they were very happy with what you had given them previously, but I think there was a sense that at least one of them wanted more information and a better understanding of what other cities were doing and maybe more protection. So I don't know how that will all shake out, but I expect that Garrett and Chad will be looking at some other jurisdictions to kind of bring you a menu of options. And then, of course, you have the discretion to do what you want with that, because they really didn't. I felt at least that they left it pretty open-ended. So I think they're kind of relying on your expertise in that. And I didn't hear any clear instruction other than looking to other cities and seeing what's working. I didn't hear consensus around anything else other than, a general acknowledgement that trees were nice.
Did it specifically mention any particular cities? Because I think we started ours with Candy Beaches. We had discussion about that.
Yeah, I think that they're kind of a mixed viewpoint across the council as far as what they're hoping to get. And in my sense, there are a couple of councilors that their hope was that they would just have something that was clear and objective and easier to understand, and that you gave them that because you changed diameter circumference, which should make it easier for people to understand what qualifies as a tree and what doesn't. And also easier for Chad if he needs to go out there and kind of assess things. You know, I sensed that there's maybe one member of council that would like it to be more regulatory, and was interested in seeing what other cities are doing, particularly around. Right now, you can do 5 trees by right. And so I think that the one counselor had a little bit of discomfort with that. And then I just think that two members of the council were kind of like, well, what else is out there? Maybe we can take a look at what's worked and maybe what hasn't. And Garrett at one point mentioned urban forestry. I didn't sense that they were really looking to that. I sent or that more than one was looking to that. I sensed that for a couple of them, it was more of just an exploratory thing. And then, you know, obviously, you guys have spent a lot of time on trees, so you had to spend a little more time on trees.
I would hope they might consult or in those, John and Russ put in a lot of time bringing to us information and suggestions and everything. So I think they're well informed. I thought you guys were well informed about trees and, you know, regulations. So, okay, so that'll come back to us, you say. Anything else for us?
No, though we have an interesting application this evening, and plus I enjoy the coast time here, so giving me a good excuse to spend an extra night and kind of, this is something that we haven't seen before, so we can kind of discuss what it does do and what it doesn't do, and then what it could do. And those kind of are the 3 elements of that. So hopefully we have a good discussion, and by the end of the evening, we all have a full understanding about that.
Right, thank you. Garrett, as staff, do you have anything to report?
Sure. So just following up on the tree issues and the tree ordinance. The only thing I'd add to what Peter said is that some of the feedback was targeted at a few specific issues that I think we can work through pretty efficiently, and that I don't expect would be too controversial or there'd be too much disagreement over. At the very least, we can bring back a revised ordinance to city council that addresses those issues. If not some of those other divergences that Peter referred to in terms of wanting more protections versus concerns about property rights. Moving on from the tree ordinance. So in any case, we'll bring back an agenda item at the next meeting for you all with some more information and some options on where to go next with that. The other item is that we have a fourplex residential development that was permitted east of US 101 between Cutler Lane and Sea Ridge Road, basically just east of where 5th Avenue intersects US 101. It's accessed by a private road that connects to US 101, and the road needs to be named. The city of Gearhart doesn't have an established process for naming private roads outside of a subdivision process. And so we're gonna propose working with you all to name the road as your body names roads through the subdivision process, and using Clatsop County's road naming standards as guidelines for doing that. And so these standards are pretty common sense principles, like the road name should not sound like other road names. It shouldn't be more than 3 words, things along those lines. And the basic idea is that a private road that serves more than 3 residences should be named so that emergency responders can efficiently find their way to the location. And so this is all just to say that at the next meeting, we will have an agenda item where we address this, and I'm imagining like potentially 2 meetings, one where you get to review this process and the standards for naming in detail. You can bring back ideas for street names, and it could be decided upon at the second meeting. And other than that, I'm also looking forward to our discussion on the zoning text amendment this evening. So that's it for my update.
Garrett, I have a question for you. Are we going, since, as I understand, Gerard has no ordinance, no policy or anything for naming the streets, are we going to need to put something in? An ordinance or something to have a way to do it?
I think it would at least be a good idea to work on that and create our own process for doing it that doesn't just refer to subdivision situations.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Good enough. Next thing, commissioners, do any of you have anything to report tonight? No. All right, the next thing on the agenda is the goals list. We have that in front of us. You left trees on there because, as we found out tonight, trees are a growing problem at Lubec. So, are there any other comments or concerns? No. Okay, we'll move on. Now is the time for visitors' comments. If any visitors like to make comments about anything that is not related to the agenda tonight. Do you have any comments to be made? Not seeing. All right, we will move on to the public hearing. For the gentlemen that have the application, I will be reading through information. You will have a chance to speak, and as opposed to have a chance to speak, you will be asked questions by the commission, and then hopefully we will be able to close the public hearing tonight and then make some decision on where to go with it. Okay, so we do have a script. All right, so I'm going to open the public hearing file 23-06 ZTA. The proposed legislative text amendment would amend the Gerhardt zoning ordinance Article 3, listing outright or conditional uses permitted in residential and commercial zone. Section 3.230, conditional uses in the R2 medium density residential zone, and section 3.245, exceptions to standards in the R2 medium density residential zone. You do read my disclosure statement. All persons testifying shall be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision, continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing and an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the city council or land use board of appeals or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask the planning commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence, arguments, or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearings body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing, a continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence, argument, or testimony pursuant to ORS 197.763(6)A through E. Commissioners, do we have any conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or personal bias? Is now the time to declare that. I have to ask the audience, are there any challenges to the commission's ability to make an impartial decision? Hearing none, it is time for the staff report. Garrett, it's your show.
Thank you. All right, so this is a proposed zoning ordinance amendment by the owners of the Drift Haven Inn, rather than a proposal from the city of Gearhart itself. With legislative zoning ordinance text amendments, the decision is ultimately the city council's to make following a city council hearing. Tonight, in this hearing, we're seeking a recommendation from the planning commission that would be presented to the city council. The proposed amendment, in essence, responds to a situation where there's a long-standing established use that was made non-conforming by the adoption of the Gearhart zoning ordinance and zoning map. So basically, the Drift Haven Inn is a non-conforming use in its zone. It is not a use that would be permitted if someone came in and asked to establish it now on a vacant lot in the R2 zone. And it wouldn't be eligible for a conditional use either. Non-conforming uses are allowed to continue in their present form. They're not allowed to be modified or expanded in a way that would, increase impacts on neighbors. And when non-conforming uses discontinue, for example, if there's a fire or some other issue that an owner of the use has that causes them to have to shut down for a period of time, they're not allowed to be reestablished. And so the owners of the Drift Haven Inn, who can explain ultimately their purpose probably more clearly than I can, are seeking a text amendment that would make their hotel use in the R2 zone conforming as a conditional use. So I wanted to provide that sort of basic background before just jumping into the staff report. The proposed amendments are in two parts. One is to section 3.230 of the zoning ordinance. That section lists which uses may be permitted as a conditional use in the R2 zone.
Just wait a second, Garrett. Just wait a second. What is BP? Oh, okay. It's just, I'm losing his words. Is there a way that?
I'll work on it.
Okay, all right, go ahead, sorry.
No problem. Yeah, absolutely stop me if my audio is not clear. Okay, so the proposed text amendment, the first part of it would essentially make it so that a hotel that was legally established prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance would be a use that can be permitted as a conditional use in the R2 zone. And both the applicant and staff have tried to identify properties that could conceivably be applicable to in the R2 zone. And we have not been able to identify any other hotels that were established prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance that are in the R2 zone. And so the effect of the proposed amendment would be that it really just applies to the Drift Haven Inn property, and it would make that property make that hotel a conditional use. Moving on to the second part of the amendment, section 3.245. This section provides that uses, permitted uses that are on lots that don't meet the minimum lot size requirements can continue. And the proposed amendment would clarify or add onto this that it's not just permitted uses on lots that don't conform to the minimum lot size requirements. It's also uses that are conditionally permitted. So that's the extent of the amendments. As with any conditional use, when someone wants to expand a permitted conditional use or modify it, that requires a new conditional use permit. So the proposed amendment does not permit an expansion of the hotel use, an intensification of the use, or other accessory uses that you might imagine could go along with a hotel. So compared to many legislative zoning ordinance amendments, it seems that the overall effect of this one is both very geographically targeted and limited in terms of its implications for what kinds of development could be allowed in the future that aren't already allowed. There's two criteria for approving a zoning ordinance amendment. One is that the amendment has to be consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the other is that it has to serve a public need. So the staff report reviews comprehensive plan policies, and I would say that for the most part, the comprehensive plan doesn't seem to speak to this situation. However, there are some policies at the beginning of the comprehensive plan that are listed on page 3 of the staff report. These are in the general development goals and the residential and commercial development policies. Particularly, there's a policy that comes up when the Planning Commission considers zoning map amendments, for example, that the city will not designate additional property for commercial development. And so the staff report finds that this amendment would not designate additional property for commercial development. It's making an existing commercial use conforming in its present form. Going beyond that, most of the comprehensive plan policies just are not applicable. Conceivably, just to cover our bases here, the site is within the geologic hazard overlay zone, which at this location would limit the size of a hotel to having 50 units. And the proposed amendment would not allow any additional units beyond what are there right now. So that summarizes the comprehensive plan policies that staff found were potentially applicable to the proposal. When it comes to a demonstration of public need, the applicant in their report describes some of the risks to their ongoing business from being a non-conforming use. And they describe the public benefits of their use continuing into the future. And so the argument that this satisfies a public need is basically that this use is at some elevated risk of not being able to continue into the future. And that if that were to happen, there would be, for example, a loss of hotel and occupancy tax revenue, property tax revenue, to the extent that the hotel serves visitors or family members of residents visiting Gearhart. It provides some local service in that regard. And that, so that's the argument for why the proposal satisfies a public need, and staff think it would be reasonable to agree with that argument. Overall, I'm okay with this, and it seems that other staff are okay with it as well. I think that ideally, the city's zoning map would have designated this site in a way where the existing use would be conforming. But considering where we are right now, that the applicant has requested that this issue be addressed, we're okay with moving forward with it, and the staff report's findings would support a recommendation that the city council approve the text amendment. But we're just like you, have our ears open to hear what the applicant has to say and anyone else who testifies this evening. So that'll be it from me for now. Thank you.
Okay. Do any of the commissioners have questions for Garrett? Not yet. I do. On your amendment criteria number 2, demonstration of public need, you quote what the applicant said, but I don't know what you said. And it appears to me reasonable, possible, could. I'm finding those words, and did you verify any of it? I can't think of a time where I've seen the applicant's reason has been quoted specifically in the findings. Did you verify any of this?
I verified some of this.
Okay.
So initially, because I didn't understand why the applicant was doing this. And my other concern was, what are the collateral, what other properties could be covered under this? I was specifically thought of the property that used to be the Young Life facility, that verified that was R1, so that wasn't covered. There's the Lodge of Little Beach that also has possibly could come under this. That's also zoned R1. It's got the vacation rental right now, so neither of those were completed. as the applicant pointed out, the other properties, the Windjammer and the McMenamins are both C2, so they wouldn't be impacted by this. And then I called a friend of mine who's in finance to ask about what having a pre-existing non-conforming use, how that would impact your ability to get financing. And his response was it absolutely would. So a bank or any lender is going to look at the underlying zoning, and having a pre-existing non-conforming use is not something that a lender or a bank are used to dealing with and are going to necessarily understand. And the deal with having a pre-existing non-conforming use, and again, I'll use the Young Life facility as an example. They did not use that facility for a period of 3 years. And on year one day, the year one and one more day, they lost that ability. They came to us, and we're very honest about what they'd done, which is they said, we haven't used this as a camp in 3 years. What uses can it have? And, Chad and I told them it can be a single family house. So although that had many of the facilities that you would associate with commercial property, including commercial kitchens, bathrooms on acreage, their sports facilities, because they had given up, because they had not at least sent one camp group into that house during those years, they lost the ability to do that. With this group, if they were to decide to take the hotel down to the studs and construct it exactly what it was, as it was, and they didn't get that done in a year, it would be apartments. They could not use it as a hotel because they would have abandoned the use. So by allowing this conditionally, it's easier and again, I only talked to one lender because I didn't think I needed to talk to more than one. But the conditional use is something that comes up a lot, so that's something they can understand. And then, they can have this in the event of a fire or other issue, or if they want to do a major remodel, they don't have to worry about this. And then the other thing that the way that I described it to Garrett and Chad is I understood it, and I developed my own opinion prior to speaking to either Brian or Garrett. And then I called them and I had a conversation. I worked with both of them in both with and against them in other jurisdictions, so I know both of them well. And I had a conversation with them and they independently verified what I had already concluded, is how I would say. The other thing that this makes possible is it makes it possible that they could bring application in front of the Planning Commission and Council or something beyond what they are doing now. And the way that it's written, it's written in a way that would make it very easy for the Planning Commission or City Council to say no. Because whether or not a use makes it more non-conforming is, given that you're entitled to vast deference in your interpretation of our code. If you say no, that whatever they want to do makes it more non-conforming. Traditionally and currently under LUBA cases, you would win. So it's not something that likely would be appealed. But if they brought something to the Planning Commission and City Council that City Council, Planning Commission really liked, you would have the flexibility to say, this is something that could benefit the city. This is something we want you to do. So it's written in a way that if they want to do something beyond what they're doing now, they can't, under the decision that will eventually be made by the City Council on this application, but at some point in the future they could. And I don't know what that would look like. It might be a modification to the facility. It might be I think I've stated all the hotels in Gerhardt I haven't stated that one, their one in a while, but, you know, I don't remember exactly how the room was configured and all that, but it would give them the ability to do to come in with the application, do certain things and give you the ability to say yes, because right now as a pre-existing non-conforming use, they can't really do anything. And the other thing, you know, there have been some questions about exactly what activities were going on at the hotel previously, and we somewhat have a good idea. We know there were clam bakes and fish fries and there have been various things. But with the pre-existing non-conforming use, it's always like evidence-based and relying upon like historic record and all these things. And there's just a lot that we don't necessarily know. So if it's allowed as a conditional use, it kind of allows us to reset everything, and they have a better understanding of what they can do, and we have a better understanding about what we can do from a regulatory standpoint. And then they have the flexibility to ask our permission to do something else in the future, and you have the flexibility to say yes, because right now you wouldn't be able to say yes if you wanted to. So that was how I kind of got to where I was when I had the conversation with the team, all of us, and again, how I would describe it is it will make it easier for them to get financing. It will make it easier for them to do repairs, replacement, et cetera, without all the pressure of the law. And then it will also allow them in the future, if they want to ask permission to do something else, and then, you know, you can do it if you want. So it creates more certainty as of today, if you recommend it and then the city council approves it. And then it may create a future opportunity if they want to take a future opportunity.
Okay, so, but I think you're saying that if they have a hotel right now, and if they want to put in, I don't know, a little restaurant or something in there, they'd have to come and get permission. That would have to be approved, is that correct?
So if they're adding anything, and this is where it gets a little tricky, because my recollection is some of the units in it had kitchenettes with stoves. Yeah, that's my, right? Is that, okay, so one of the things that makes this current situation less than ideal is that there previously were there were in our kitchen facilities in this, but there wasn't a restaurant. And so the legal question that I don't want to find the answer out to, because I don't want to litigate, is if they're operating within the building envelope, are they able, and it's consistent with what's happened there previously, because there are kitchens in there, can they do that? And that's one of the many reasons why having a conditional use where they have more certainty as to what they can and can't do may benefit both us and them, because they have really tried to do what we want them to do, and there are instances where we just don't have sufficient clarity to know what the answer is. For instance, the hotels traditionally provided people with wine and beer. They've traditionally had things like fish fries where alcohol has been served. These are all things that have been documented in the past, so we know it occurred, right? So it's within it. But then when you get to something like, okay, the units had kitchens, but there wasn't a commercial kitchen, what does this look like? Things just start getting really murky. And I think to their credit, they've understood some of the ambiguities, and so they haven't kind of, we've all kind of agreed we'll try and work through some of these issues together, and I think we have. But yeah, future clarity and a process going forward so that they can ask for something, and if the city wants it, you can give it to them, is really I'd say the second biggest benefit of what they're proposing tonight. And again, I was concerned about any collateral impacts on this, but because they're the only 1994 hotel that's in the R2, we avoid those. If the Young Life house, it also, and I'm not saying that would qualify as a hotel, but it arguably could. If that wasn't an R2, I think that this would be probably a larger conversation, but it really is specific to this one property.
I'm sorry to keep asking questions, I do have one.
Yeah,
How often does something like this happen that affects one single property?
right. I always say that Gerhard is a very unique place. So it would have been incredibly unusual in another city for this to receive an R2 zoning to begin with. Because a best practice is you don't make something a non-conforming use that already exists. And by putting this into R2, that's what they did. I don't know why they did that. My best guess is because on the other side of the street is R1. So you have a commercial abutting them and you have R1 on the other side. And I don't know who their attorney was, but maybe they just said, okay, we'll split it in the middle and call it R2. But that's really not something that you see. I mean, you see a pre-existing non-conforming use in unincorporated county is where I see it a lot. It's very unusual to see it in the city.
Thank you.
I know.
Yes, Solon.
So I just wanted to, ask if it makes any difference, I know the word hotel is used, and, you know, I think of McMenamins as a hotel. I think of the Windjammer as a motel.
Yeah,
There's differences in the functionality and what is offered to the people that stay there. And I did, and hotel is in the definitions, and so is boarding house, lodging, and rooming house. Motel is not in the definitions of the zoning, but it is referred to in the parking policy. It talks about motels. And so I just wonder if that terminology, not necessarily for this, because unless it would move forward, I don't want to use the word hotel to make it mean more than maybe what it is.
yeah, I understand. I understand what you're saying. As you point out, what our code says, it says hotel and then it says boarding house and it says rooming house. A boarding house and a rooming house is generally with the on-site owner living in the facility and then renting rooms on a monthly basis. Versus like a bed and breakfast, which would be someone living on site and then renting the rooms on a less than monthly basis. So based on our definitions in our code, hotel is the closest thing to what this is.
Anyone else?
Is there anything, you described a lot of benefits for making this change, so I'm curious, is there anything that, you know, 5 years from now, we look back and say, oh man, I wish we had done that? What are the downsides?
I mean, the downside would be that they bring a future application that for this planning commission, that a future planning commission really likes and you don't. So, I mean, you can't bind a future planning commission or a future city council. They can do what they want. A future city council might like something that you don't like at all. So, and they'd have the ability to give it to them. So, none of us have a crystal ball. And I mean, I don't think of Gerhard like as necessarily the most permissive of cities as far as allowing stuff. So I don't know that, you know, but it has the potential, for them to bring in an application and get it approved. And it has the potential that it would change the downtown town in some manner. And there's some people that don't want the downtown to change at all. And there's some people that say, well, maybe we should polish it up a little. So, yeah, it gives them the possibility of a future project. And I guess a downside would be if people don't like it. But people are pretty vocal when they don't like something, so.
Yes, Eric.
So I guess in terms of potential unintended consequences, it seems pretty certain though that those unintended things we don't know about would have no impact on any other entity in the R2 zone. It really is just limited to this.
Yeah, there is no one that's going to be able to piggyback off of their work in the R2. Could people in the R1 come in and propose something similar for R1 based off of this work? They could, but the difference between the difference between one R2 property that abuts the commercial property in the city versus R1 properties that are in the middle of neighborhoods, I think the public reaction to that will probably be pretty different. So, yeah, as far as collateral impacts, it creates the framework that someone else could follow, but it doesn't, nobody's walking through the door behind them automatically.
I guess to follow that up, there's nobody else in the R2 zone. But would there be entities in any of the other zones that would use this as a precedent? That they were established with zoning ordinances, and they were grandfathered in, now they want to have the same privilege, but they were in other zones. Did we look at that?
So we didn't look at all, the only businesses we looked at were what I term hotels, because that was, I wanted to have an understanding of exactly that. As far as other pre-existing non-conforming uses, that are of size, and Garrett and I have had this conversation. We would probably encourage that they pursue a zone change rather than a text amendment. I'm comfortable with the text amendment in this case because it's so limited. In fact, part of me likes the fact that they did this in a text amendment, because if we had simply made them a C2, then the city would lose, the planning commission council would lose a lot of control. So what this really does is give the city maximum control to, if they want something different in the future, it gives us maximum control to say no, versus it as zone change to a C2, we would not be able to. If they wanted a zone change, that the C2 is probably what we would recommend that they pursue. And then the other piece that I kind of expected on this, but we didn't get, is we have 5,000 square feet of floating C2. That was, is C1, yeah, okay. We have 5,000 square feet of floating commercial right now that, based on the park, that different people have considered applying for in the past. But again, they went with the text amendment, the very narrow text amendment.
I just add also that, you know, someone else in the future could point to this case if it's approved and say, you approved a zoning text amendment for them. So please approve a zoning text amendment or a zoning map amendment for us too. Every case has to be decided on its own merits with the unique context and circumstances surrounding it. And we would absolutely approach any future cases that way. And they can ask for, and you know, anyone else has the right to ask for a zoning map amendment or a text amendment, regardless of what the decision in this case is. So there's, in terms of like generating a pipeline of similar requests, I wouldn't expect it, and in any case, they're all decided on their own.
Right, thank you. Do we have any, yes?
I think I wanna, Eric and I think we're thinking the same vein. So I presume, I think you guys are gonna say something like you wanna get proper financing in case there's an accident or fire or something like that, that allows you to rebuild in the way it is like that. So why would these non-conforming uses in all the other zones, wouldn't that also be something that would behoove both those property owners and the city to conditionally allow conditional uses
Well, so
in these kind of situations, non-conforming?
where we most commonly have pre-existing non-conforming uses are not in businesses. It's fences and signs. So there was a time where people could put up a sign on the highway without ODOT's permission. All the ones you see on I-5 are grandfathered in because they're pre-existing non-conforming uses. All of our fences that were prior to, I can't remember her name. Remember that one? Yeah. So they were all,
Lucky part of it.
right, they were all pre-existing, they are all, any fence constructed before then is a pre-existing non-conforming use. So that's where we commonly see pre-existing non-conforming uses in something like that. It's more unusual to see them as structures or businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Commissioner Messberg,
Oh, yes, yes, John, sorry. Chair.
Yes.
I can't see him.
Oh,
Wake up. Okay, we couldn't see you, John. Now I can see you, okay. Oh, he can't hear it. Is he muted?
yes.
I can't unmute him, I can only, that's John.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
There you
Thank
are.
I was trying to make a comment, but I couldn't. So this is a question probably for Peter or Garrett or both, which is why wouldn't this language be in 3220 versus 3230? What's the advantage of doing it in the conditional use section versus the kind of outright section? Why not just put that section 4, which has been inserted as section 7 in 3220? Wouldn't that be a simpler way to do it? But there must be some logic for doing it this way.
I think it's because this gives us even more control than if it were allowed outright. It could go there. This requires them to jump over a couple extra hurdles.
So this gives us more control.
I'm guessing they wouldn't, I'm guessing if you suggested we put it in the other section, that they would, feel very good about that, is what I'm guessing. And we could do that.
But so you're saying the advantage of it being in this section is it allows us more control in the future.
Yeah, because they would have to come in with the conditional use permit.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay. So now it is the time for the applicant to give their testimony. Whoever's talking, please, it helps if you stand up and give us your full name and your address.
Okay, my name is Matt Cole. My address is 415 Northwest 11th, Portland, Oregon 97209. I am part of the ownership group that bought the hotel in 2021. As you may or may not be aware, we remodeled every one of the rooms, spent quite a bit of money and care to put it back in its current state. Our ownership group varies from people who own homes in Gearhart to just some other investors. we've self-funded the project to date entirely through funds that we've raised. We're happy that the hotel is back up and open. We're doing very well. Winter months are not as great, but we're still doing very well. Part of this just came up for us. If we do want to put a loan on the property and pay back some of what people put into the hotel, lenders don't look kindly on our current situation. Also, if the hotel were to be damaged, we want to put back what is there. The way it is written today, we cannot with certainty build back what we have today. So we understand that we were thoughtful in the way we approach this and not trying to ask for too much. We just want to continue to operate the hotel as it is today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian. More technical.
Can you just spell your name just so, because it's not on the application.
Sure. MATTCOLE. Thank you.
And you represent Pacific? Is it,
The ownership entity.
okay, and that's Pacific, whatever.
Yeah.
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 Hi. My name is Brian Barricchioni. Angelina has that in print, so she can spell it out. So I'm a
Your
planner.
address, please.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's good. So we're at 1515 Southeast Water Avenue in Portland, Oregon. Maybe before I launch into some of the particulars here, I'll just mention my own personal background. Although I'm at Mackenzie now and I've been there about 10 years. Prior to that, I worked for about 10 years at the city of Scappoose, and Peter and I met there when he was a city attorney. So we do have some history, and that informed a bit how we approached this ask. Matt has talked about financing being one of the reasons for requesting a change here, as well as the ability to rebuild if needed in case of damage or needing to just upgrade, take care of some things. But when we're thinking about mechanisms for how can we achieve this, we wanted to look at this not only like what serves specific cottages, the owner the best, but what serves and protects the city of Gerhart and the residents here. So we've been through a few iterations. And I just want to state outright what this change would not do. What it wouldn't do is allow any new hotels in the R2 zone. We didn't want to create a situation where inadvertently or otherwise somebody new could open a hotel in residential neighborhoods. So that's why the code change refers to, pre-existing hotels that were there when the zoning was imposed in 1994. The Drift Haven dates back to the 1940s. It was the Tyberg Motel originally, and then it went to more recently the Gerhart Ocean Inn, and Drift Haven's the latest incarnation. The site's got a long history of being used as a hotel, and certainly, it's part of the fabric of the community by this point. And ultimately, ownership asked us at Mackenzie, what can we do? What are some ways that we can keep that? So it's still part of the fabric of the community. We're not asking for some big change, but we want to get in a category where lenders are friendly to us. So because it's in the R2 zone, it's non-conforming, and Garrett and Peter have both talked about some of the disadvantages for the ownership about that. So we looked a little bit at, well, maybe we should rezone this property, because there's two zones in the city that allow hotels, the C2 zone and the R3 zone. Both of those are more intense than the R2 zone, so we weren't real keen on that. We didn't think that, that would be well received by the planning commission, the city council, or frankly, the residents. Because, asterisk, if it's rezoned, the owners could demolish the building and build any of those uses that are allowed in that zone. And, the city wouldn't have a whole lot of, ability to say no to that if it's permitted use, in one of the, R3 or C2. So ultimately, we kind of zeroed in on this text amendment and said, well, if we can write a code change that only applies to existing hotels, of which there are very few in town, and then it limits it to the zone, the R2 zone, let's see what that looks like. And so we worked with Angelina and Chad to find out all the hotels in the community. We found our unicorn. There's only one hotel that's pre-existing and it's in the R2 zone. So if we can limit the text changes just to that, we won't have ripple effects. We won't lead to, hotels all over the place or anything like that. And so that's what we settled on. Because it's an existing facility, it shouldn't really have effects on traffic or noise or lead to, really anything changing. Unless the owners come to you in the future with a specific conditional use request. And so, why the question was asked, why didn't we put this into the list of permitted uses? And that felt a little presumptuous on our part. We assumed that the planning commission and the city council would prefer it in the conditional use category because it gives you that additional level of control if in the future the owners decide to change something. It's a more discretionary process. The city has more control over that. And so that seemed a safer ask, but if Commissioner Vesper's suggestion or inquiry is welcome by planning commission or city council, certainly the applicant do not object if this were placed into the permitted use category. In terms of the questions that were raised earlier about public benefits, it's a little bit amorphous anytime you want to talk about public benefit and how do you figure out if something meets that category. But here, what we really want to emphasize is, by supporting an existing business that's been there for years, that's a benefit to the public because it's a longstanding institution. It's a place for people to stay when they come to the coast. It's part of the community. And frankly, anytime you can sort of clean up the code and have additional clarity, that's sort of good in the planning realm because you're making things easier to understand for the owners, for the public, the planning commission, the lenders. They can all look to this and see, oh yeah, we're in this category. And by putting it into the conditional use category, we think there's a benefit in that too, in that it gives the planning commission a mechanism to look at possible changes in the future. We've given a pretty sizable report for y'all to read through. I think that we've satisfied the burden of proof in terms of demonstrating compliance, not only with the public benefit, but with the conditional use, with the comprehensive plan policies. We've also stepped through the statewide land use planning goals and administrative goals. And so with that, we're respectfully requesting the planning commission recommend approval to the city council when this application gets forwarded to them in the future. That's it for my remarks. I'll wait here and see if you have any questions.
Is the urgent going to speak?
Only
Oh,
if
is he the note taker?
only if I did a bad job.
Brian, thank you for being here. Is the double underlined portion of the report, those are the
That's what.
two
we're
changes?
proposing.
Okay, and you're happy with that and that meets your needs?
Yes, yep.
Okay,
We didn't subtract anything, we're only adding.
and then can I ask you a question? Why did you include the list of the short-term rentals in your report?
That was meant to be by contrast. So somewhere in here, we talk about how this only applies to hotels. It does not apply to any short-term rentals. And to be clear to what it did not apply, we included this list that the city maintains of the short-term rentals. Because we don't want to give the impression the list code change would affect any of how that operates. That's its own permitting process and approval, and, you know, some of those elapse, et cetera, or can't be transferred on change of ownership. So this is not that. That's why the list is in there. We've got a list of the 4 hotels and then a list of the, I don't know, 50 or 60 vacation rentals. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Appreciate that question.
Judy?
I read the report.
Aaron?
I don't have any questions.
Fine. No more questions.
Well, the only question I have is the second lot, the motel property is on 50 by 100, I presume. And then the second lot, which is a smaller lot, does the language here allow any more construction on that smaller lot? I mean, could the motel be expanded into that lot the way this is written?
Right, so not outright, but potentially in the future, if there were an application for that through the conditional use process.
And if we went to sewer, because that is also our septic system.
Okay.
But I'm sure that there might be some wiggle room in there.
Yeah, I figured a lot of the septic was, I don't know how much.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure what the ratios are. There's probably some area, but they are restricted by septic as well.
The county sanitary, I'm sure, has rules on the few substances, yeah.
Anything else, Russ?
No.
I have a question. So you give us this part, but then you add this other line into exceptions to standards
Yeah.
or conditionally permitted.
Yes.
And that opens up all the things that are conditionally permitted in the R1 and in the R2 zone, all of those. And I think that opens a whole nother can of worms.
I appreciate that question. And I'll give you a two-part answer. The first is this doesn't apply to R1 because that specific code provision is in the R2.
No, it doesn't. Because it says anything that is conditionally permitted in the R2 is also conditionally permitted in the R1 zone. I read that someplace.
I stand corrected. Okay.
It does it? I thought it was anything conditionally permitted in R1 is conditionally permitted in R2.
That's what I'm saying. So it's saying that then he puts or conditionally permitted,
Yeah.
and then opens up all those that are, it's my interpretation. All those conditionally permitted in R1 and conditionally permitted in R2. Am I?
So the way that I've interpreted that is that anything that's conditionally permitted in R1 is conditionally permitted in R2 plus any additional items that we put in R2. So if you're, instead of restating everything that's conditionally used in R1 in our R2, we just reference the fact that if it's in, because R1 is our least impactful thing. So we wouldn't have something that was allowed in R1 that wasn't allowed in R2 because.
That's not my question.
Yeah.
They've added the line in under exceptions to standards in 3.245.
Right.
Or conditionally permitted.
Yeah.
So that opens up, where we focus, this only focuses on this hotel. By adding those 3 words in my head, it opens up all the things that are conditionally permitted.
Now my colleague is going to speak. Don't get name that.
Am I?
Sure. Garrett Stevenson, my address is 1211 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Suite 1900, Portland, Oregon 97204. So, Commissioner, that's a good question, and I've got a couple of answers for you. Number one is, if you read earlier in that sentence, it talks about the passage of ordinance 477 in January 24th, 1978. So the purpose for this is to clarify that since this property was developed in its current configuration prior to that time, then we can continue to operate. But the other thing is, I don't read the zoning code the same way you do, for the reason being that it says after or conditionally permitted in this zone. So the way I read this sentence is that it applies only to the zone that this paragraph lives in. From what I understand, Brian, but correct me if I'm wrong, this paragraph only lives in the zone we're talking about.
Correct.
So I would not interpret this as something that would apply to any other zone, but also it's essential for us because just like our zoning as a matter of land use was applied without thinking about what was there already, the similar situation is the case when we talk about area or dimension. And so what this allows us to do is to simply continue operating without having a non-conforming lot size. Does that make sense? Okay, well, that was what the intent was.
Okay, that was what the intent, but if I can be so bold, or conditionally permitted. So there is a list of all the things that are conditionally permitted in the R1 zone. Doesn't mean they're in the R1 zone, it just means they're conditionally permitted in the R1 zone. They may be in the R2 zone. Okay, so there's businesses in the R2 zone that are conditionally permitted, right? And that's in this short list here, these three items here. But all the items listed in the R1 zone that are conditionally permitted in R1 or R2 would also fall on that list.
Yeah, so this is where you and I are gonna have to agree to disagree, because when I see a paragraph that is set in a specific zoning code and it refers to in this zone, I don't read it as applying to any other zone that
That's not what I'm
paragraph.
saying.
No, Garrett, I don't think I think I understand what both of you are saying. So the way I'm gonna resolve this is by reading the 9 items that are allowed in the R1 as conditional use, which are church or other religious structures, primary, elementary, junior high or senior high schools, or higher education institution, community meetings building, government facility, daycare center, golf course, except commercial driving ranges or miniature course. So we're talking full length golf course, public park and recreational facility, temporary real estate office in a subdivision. So that's when they have the unit in the subdivision. And then the 9th is public service and public utility used to serve the entire city or other large geographic areas. So that's like power lines. So those are what are allowed in the R1 zone. What's allowed in the R2 zone are those items plus a manufactured dwelling park and a manufactured dwelling subdivision. That's R2. As Garrett said, when he referred to in this section, so it would be those 9. If this is past this one hotel, and then the other 2. And from the list of what's conditionally allowed, I can't think of any in.
Well, put it a different way, currently, everything that's allowed in that R1 zone that is conditionally, this is currently allowed in the R2 zone, this is currently an R2 zone spot. So even right now with no changes, these people could demolish and apply for one of these other uses. So, yeah, really no net change.
Yeah.
But yes, those 9 items are still available in the R2 zone.
I just wondered if those 3 words needed to be there. That they could open something else, because the presentation has been, this is very narrowly focused. And so we want to keep it that way, that's narrowly focused. And I just think that it could be argued a different way. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not really wrong.
Well, all I can tell you is that when I first looked at this and Brian sent me his drafts and we talked about how we wanted to propose this, there were really 2 principles at play. Number 1 is we did not want to do the zone change because we do understand that this city values the status quo on this lot, and the zone change would fundamentally change that. So when we looked at doing a plan or a text amendment, we actually started with something bigger, which included some changes to the non-conforming use section and so forth. And what we did is we pared that back to what we believe was absolutely essential for this. And so when I read this, general exceptions to lot size requirements, I understand, is there 2 lots there? Okay, so one of those, I'm guessing meets the minimum lot size, one of them doesn't. And so the idea here is to not, in doing this, forget to make sure to clean up the non-conforming lot issue here for this site. It really doesn't relate, in my view, to land use at all. What it does is allows us to not create through this a non-conforming lot of record. Because there's 2 elements to the land use question. There is what use can we do here? And that's, I think, been really, really well covered by everybody who spoke before me. But the other question is, and this sometimes does come up with lenders, is do you have a legal lot? Well, one of the things we wanted to make sure we did is that in this instance, let's make sure if we want to make the use legal, let's make the land that it sits on legal as well. And I think that was the intent behind this, Brian, but do correct me if I'm wrong. So, you know, we did not want to leave, if we're going to go through this much trouble, we didn't want to leave any further areas of non-compliance or non-conformity on this site, which makes sense to me to just clean up while we're doing it. We did pare this back quite a bit from other ways of wordsmithing it. And this is actually, I know this is new for this planning commission, but I've been involved in lots of cases where there have been mistakes in the zoning or there have been unintended consequences in the zoning. And the intent behind anytime you see something like this, where you try to take a non-conforming use and put it into a conditional use basket, the intent is to, if for nothing else, maintain the status quo. And sometimes that's absolutely necessary to do, because I'll tell you, I had a case once with, it was a car dealership. And they wanted to maintain the car dealership. They needed to go to a bank to get a loan to do what Ford or GM wanted them to do. They could not do that because they were an existing non-conforming use. And the way we handled that was, we want to make sure that our existing uses that are out there look nice. We want to make sure they're maintained, that they're attractive. The way to do that is to give them that conditional use status. Some cities do it automatically. City of Portland, for example, when they adopted certain zoning codes in the 70s and 80s, they gave lots of properties automatic conditional use status to avoid this very problem. So I would say that it is not a situation where we're asking for more flexibility in terms of what we're going to build there. This allows us to maintain what is there in as nice a state as we can. And that's why why we go to the conditional use instead of, say, an outright permitted use or something like that. And frankly, as much as I'd love to make this an outright permitted use, that would make no sense for a residential zone. So I do think this is about as narrowly tailored as we can make it. The planning commission can decide to not clean up the lot issue, but we think it makes sense to do so along with the land use piece.
Yeah, we've had at least that I can think of 4 zoning changes within the last year, 2 years. We've had a lot of them. I'm not going to, no, so we have that. Okay, any other questions for anyone? No? Okay, thank you. Do I have anyone that would, oh, and do I have any proponents? Anyone out there, staff? No, do I have any opponents? No. Any neutral comments? Okay, so, next would be the applicant's rebuttal. If we had any negative comments, we don't have anything else. Have you said everything you would like to say?
Yes, unless there are any other questions. Also, I don't think, Peter, just as for the good of the order, we're not gonna leave the written record open. Okay.
All right. Then I close the public hearing. It is now time for our discussion. So we need to discuss. Judy, do you have anything you would like to say? No. No. Dawn?
I have a couple things. As far as the zoning and the usage that I think you described, just to clarify, everything that's allowed in R1 is then allowed in R2 and R3, correct? And then R2 is allowed in R3. It doesn't go the other direction. Okay, I thought that's where you were going.
No,
and,
no, I was taking up from R1 to R2.
Is this similar to what I would refer to as the Shamrock Pines Apartments issue? With that had the fire?
It could be, it was zoned commercial already.
No. It was
No,
on R1.
Was it zoned to R1?
It was R1 and he wanted to make it R3.
Okay,
because
he
it
wanted to
burned
make it
down and
R3.
He couldn't build it.
He couldn't rebuild it. And and again, it was, that's why I'm saying we've seen these before. And he came with very specific plans about what he could do and everything, and then the people spoke that were around there, and we approved it. And I can only speak for myself, what was in my head at that time, it was helping create more workforce housing, which is one of those kind of goals we've been looking at. And again, the problem with Gearhart, with all the rural communities, I found the same thing as East, I was on the planning commission. There's these little pockets that are zoned. They don't make any sense. They were going that way for some reason. Maybe in 1994, that property was apartments because we told at some point it was apartments. Maybe that's what was going on.
Right.
So, yeah, it's similar, but not exactly. the same.
Right, so I guess my opinion of this is for you all to be able to get your financing, and if there was destruction, be able to rebuild, which I understand you wouldn't be able to do that the way it currently is, so to continue the operation as it is, to me, seems like a no-brainer.
Eric, for your first time?
Yeah, what's the normal protocols? This is the time to just.
This is a normal, yes, and this is the time where you can state your opinion, if you have some questions for anyone else. I try to go and call on everyone, so everyone gets a chance to speak.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
It seems to me straightforward. They are in no man's land right now due to the oversight at the time. But so to me, the way I interpret this, the time zoning was created, they were left as this non-conforming use wasn't dealt with. It should have been dealt with then. But now there was no man's land and they just need appropriate legal standing for being allowed to be where they are. And it seems to me very clear. And I think they gave a nice presentation. I don't have any questions or problems with it unless somebody else can point something else out to me.
Okay, I'm gonna go to John, because I keep forgetting you. John, do you have any comments, anything you'd like to say? He has.
So he needs me to.
They have to unmute me every time, so.
Okay, you're on.
I was just, I couldn't think of what is the good physical expression of I can't speak. But no, I think again, the presentation was clear. It seems very contained. And I was by no means suggesting the change earlier, just asking why, what something was. So I'm glad to go with our recommendation of our attorney and our planner to leave it the way it is, and looks good to me.
Okay, thank you. Paulina?
I don't really have any questions. I sort of feel like if we were considering putting a definition of motel in there, I'd be 100% more comfortable. But that would be my only comment right now.
Okay, great. Russ?
No, I think it's a good presentation with a good, basis.
I have to tell you, Paulina, my husband corrected me 50 million times. It's a motel, not a hotel. Yeah, okay, but it says hotel. I'm still concerned about that line, and those 3 words bother me. I guess my question is, and I don't know if you were involved with it, and again, I don't know the details. I know there was issue with alcohol and something there at your property. Something going on, but maybe that was before you, or You're looking, obviously, it's the wrong question, I got it.
No, I can address that, so, and this really illustrates one of the problems with having, pre-existing non-conforming use. And I would have been a witness if this had been a case, because I had stated that we'll call it a hotel. And I had been served alcohol while I was there. I think I had been given a bottle. I think you got complimentary wine or beer when you, and that had been a long-standing thing. And then for special events like the clam bake or whatever, fish fries, they would bring in a bar. So I believe that the ownership group was aware of that when they purchased it, and they applied for a liquor license, which they received. And then a lot of these issues came in, and that's the problem with the pre-existing non-conforming use, is that they had a lot of evidence that traditionally alcohol had been served and or sold at the establishment. There are also some, and that it's common practice at bed and breakfasts or other small inns to have a complimentary happy hour or serve alcohol. On the other hand, you know, there's certain food requirements that are anticipated by the OLCC, and it just created kind of this murky, the term no man's land was used previously. This was one of those instances where, you know, through no fault of their own, they believed they were simply continuing what had always happened. The prior owner, as far as we knew, had never applied for or received a liquor license, which kind of is not ideal if you're serving alcohol on commercial premises. So they were trying to do everything right, and then it, you know, triggered this review of, okay, well, what happened? And we're left with this pre-existing non-conforming use, and it didn't put any of us in a very good spot. And it's a rare instance of nobody was wrong, everyone was trying to do the right thing, and we were trying to understand what they could and couldn't do. And that took a while to kind of navigate through that process, and those are the type of unfortunate things that happen when everything's not documented, and we have that what should be clear and unambiguous is not. So they were pretty patient with us, and we were pretty patient with them, I think, and they're being very, I think, thoughtful and careful about when alcohol is served and what's happening. And we haven't had any complaints from neighbors or anything like that. So that was that issue, and it was nobody's fault. It just was it took us a while to get through the all of it. Yeah.
Okay, so we've heard from the commissioners. We've deliberated. Is there anyone that wants to say anything else, any concerns or anything? If not, do I have a motion?
I move that we approve the application
As presented.
as presented.
All right, Russ has moved. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Paulina gets the second, and negotiation there. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And a thumb. Okay, all those opposed say nay. Okay, so it has been approved. And congratulations. Good job. Moving on, we don't have any unfinished business. We don't have any new business. Do we have any concerns of the commission? Do we have any questions for the land use attorney
Open season.
This is our chance, folks. Hearing none, it is 7:31. The meeting is adjourned.